Real quick before we, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Do that right now. We love you.
Well, welcome to another episode of Real Talk. This is our opportunity to create conversations and really kind of get a little edgy with it. And today we have some of our amazing e-group leaders joining myself and E-Dog, Evan.
Yep.
Well, I think when we're talking about leadership and influence, discipleship, I mean, it's all really coming from this idea of we follow people as they follow Christ. You know, the Apostle Paul said that. And so really like the way we lead our e-group students is really a reflection of like how we lead ourselves towards Jesus. What are some areas where you say, man, I am a strong, close follower of Jesus? And what are some areas though, maybe historically in your life or right now that you're like, man, but this is when I've kind of peeled back into the crowd, where I've stood out following Jesus. Here's some areas that are stand out, but here's some ways that I kind of like fell back in the crowd.
For me, I came on staff at Elevation like 2 years ago, and I thought that, you know, being full-time ministry, like it would just, you know, be automatic as far as being close and being, you know, fully in ministry. And I think at first it was, I definitely pulled back into the crowd a little bit and wasn't as intentional about my personal relationship with God because it was more about like what I was, I guess, creating for other people. And so that's been a big journey for me of like, I can't neglect my own relationship with God for the sake of others.
I think when, I'm curious if you guys relate to this, or maybe you see it in some of your e-group students. We won't name names, but I think probably the most real way that I fall back into the crowd is there's a lot of time, as Christ was supposed to be vulnerable and transparent, but I think it's easy to play that card and say you're being transparent, but I know for me, oftentimes when I'm doing that, it's things that's easy for me to be transparent with.
Yeah.
And even like with social media, be like, I'm gonna be vulnerable here. Like I think it is something that I've fallen into is it's like fake vulnerability. And yet the stuff that it would really be scary to talk to people about or to like bring to the light, I keep that over here. And I think that's like the biggest part of my life that's like, oh, it's no different than how anyone else lives.
The Lord's been teaching me the difference between offering and sacrifice. And that's where I struggle is like, oh, I can offer you, like I can give you this as offering.
Right.
But sacrifice, like that, like I have to give that up.
Right.
And so like with trust, it's the same way. It's like I have to willingly give him my trust instead of just saying, oh yeah, I trust you, and then not. And then just pull back and be like, well, I kind of trust you. So he's been teaching me the difference between offering and sacrifice.
Sacrifice is hard for, I think, everybody, because sometimes it's like, no, I want to hold on to this. I'm good just holding on to this right here. I'm good right here. And so like really being able to like let that go is difficult, because then that comes that vulnerability, because I think like if you hold on to anger, sometimes the vulnerability is in letting people know that it's not really anger, it's hurt. And so when you expose yourself to someone and say like, you hurt me, sometimes it feels like, at least for me, it feels like I'm giving power away. When, you know, it's like I'm angry, but I'm only angry because my feelings are really, really hurt. And so it's hard, it's easy for me to be angry, and it's easy for me to tell you I'm angry. It's a lot harder for me to, like you said, sacrifice and tell someone like I'm actually really, really hurt.
I love that passage where Jesus is talking to the disciples and he asks them, what is it that you want? And you just made me think of that too, of like, that's such a powerful question. Being able to say that for yourself. Obviously Jesus, it was rhetorical, he knew what they needed, but just to go along that process for yourself of, well, what is it that I really need? What would you guys say you need most in this season of your life?
Hope.
Yeah.
Yep. That's probably the biggest thing.
Yeah.
Hope is really, really relevant, I think, in this time that we're in. And I think something I've also been struggling with is just like internal peace. Just, Lord, give me the peace that I need right now to make it day by day.
I was gonna say security.
Yeah.
I feel like this whole year, whether you want to admit it or not, it's been throwing off everyone's security, sense of security. And maybe we just had a false sense of security all along, and this is exposing that. But I mean, things like COVID and, you know, the whole election and, you know, all this stuff is like, well, what, like I just want security. I just want there to be a solution or a decision or whatever it may be. And I think back to Pastor's sermon a couple weeks ago. It was like, is that really, like, God knows the answers to the questions you don't even know to ask.
Yeah.
Like, is that really what you need? Is the security really the thing that you need? Or is there like maybe more of internal anxiety that you're trying to appease with a false security?
But I love what you said, that there's false security. And it makes me think about possibly how God is using unrest to show us how there was probably nasty stuff beneath the surface all along, and how maybe we kind of seek comfort. We feel like we need comfort when really we need something closer. And that's what I think God came to bring us, is he came to disrupt. The Holy Spirit's there to disrupt. So here's a question. What have been some things in the past or currently that God broke up, he disrupted, and it was really bad for a little bit, but it turned into something good? Because it makes me think of, one of the conversations in our country right now is being around race. It was a new idea to some people that there was still racism in America, whereas for millions of Americans it was their everyday reality.
So when I was in college, I was a senior and I'd been dating a guy for 3.5 years. He was Jewish. I knew it wasn't the right call, but I was doing it anyway because I was raised in like a church. I wasn't raised in the word of the Lord. So I dated this guy and it was just horrible. Like, it had been great for a while and then just every part of it was breaking. I didn't trust him. I didn't feel comfortable being around him anymore. I had all my purpose wrapped up in that though. I didn't see how I was valuable outside of that, and the Lord took it away from me. And then that was my rock bottom, because I said, I have no reason to be here. If not for this guy, what am I supposed to do? It was then that I met Jesus, and he said, you're here for me, and you're here to run after me, not to run after someone else.
I think obedience to God hurts sometimes. And I think that's really, I think if we can leave the students in our youth ministry, one thing would be how obedience feels like it costs us everything, but we get something better in return.
For me, one of the securities that I've always been able to say, like, oh, I grew up in church. And that is definitely a false sense of God. You know what I mean? Because you hold on to that like, oh, I'm a good Christian, I grew up in church. And I didn't meet God for the first time until I was in my 30s. I could no longer control what was happening. And so I think I stayed afloat so long because I'm good at controlling things and making things happen, and I was at a point where I just couldn't make things happen anymore. And it was one of those times where you get that need on the inside, the one that you can't even verbalize. Like, the pain is so palpable. And then I remember in those moments when I had no words to describe what I was feeling, I remember the closest that I've ever felt the presence of God was in that moment. And I never said a word. I never called his name, but because it was coming from my belly and what I needed. And I literally felt him right here the whole time. And that was when life changed for me.
My life was like that before I moved to Charlotte, where I thought I knew people in ministry. And then all of a sudden, the people that I thought I trusted really did kind of belittle me in the process publicly. And so I left there, but God was like, just give it to me. Give me that pain, because when you give me that pain, I'm gonna take it and I'm gonna use it. And so he did, and within 3 months I was in Charlotte. It wasn't even, and I had no idea that was what he was doing 3 months before that, but it was just a moment of okay, Lord, you can have this. He's like, I know you, I know it hurts. I know that you are in this unimaginable pain right now, but just give it to me and I'm gonna do something with it.
One of the fears that we face when we become a Christ follower is that feel of I have to be perfect. I think it's an unspoken thing, and it's really hard. It's hard when you've made some of your first big failures after you were so passionate about following Jesus, referencing your relationship, or I know there've been times where certain patterns and habits I had that I felt like I had kicked years. And then come back and I'm like, does God still love me? Am I what did I do wrong? Those things are so difficult. What would be your advice to people when you fail, when you feel like you're not supposed to fail?
It's something that I ask myself a lot, because as e-group leaders, what we do is we try to encourage our youth and have them walk that same life or that line. And when I reflect a little bit, I'm like, okay, so I teach them about obedience and what that really looks like in their relationship with God, but how often am I applying that to myself? Because I know what that really looks like sometimes. It's definitely a battle. So what I do if I am in a position where I'm just like, okay, God, I need you in this moment, and I'm feeling depleted, I am not above going to people that I find as spiritual leaders in my life, or Christian leaders, or, I seek that, because I know that I'm not meant to do this alone. If you are feeling like you're straying one way, it's okay. Life is going to be hard. Some of the decisions that Christ wants us to make, it's not supposed to be so cookie cutter, crystal clean all the time.
Right. Yeah.
But the thing is, you have support in your life, and that's what you utilize that for.
Yeah, I think it's if I say the verse, I feel like it'll just be dismissed because we hear it so much, but it's one that's kind of gotten like a fresh revelation for me, that for God, the all-knowing, the one that knew everything that I would do, that I would hate about myself, that why the heck did I do that? He so loved me that he sent his son.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's not like he didn't know what he was doing. Like, he knew what he was getting into when he said, no, you're still worthy. Yeah. And that's something I'm still trying to wrap my head around. It is tough for me sometimes to really fully grasp that there is grace for me, and that I don't have to hold. God's got nothing over me. He's got why do I need to hold my mistakes over my head still? And that's a daily thing I found. It's like, it's not just a one time, like, okay, I can love myself now. It's like constantly trying to like dig deeper into that of like, yeah, I made some dumb mistakes, or I don't feel like I'm good enough, but God still loves me. I still love me, and I'm gonna keep moving forward. And then trying to, I think that's how I kind of try to help lead my guys, is like just to give them that perspective. Like, you do still realize how incredible you are. Like, your resilience, and the fact that you're still capable of receiving love makes you worthy. Right. So I don't know. I think it is a perspective thing sometimes, that we can't see from our own perspective, but it takes someone else to point out that perspective.
I love the idea that we all need leaders, and I think we all recognize that. Every great leader understands their need for a leader, and so we all have areas in our life that we need to change. And oftentimes, Pastor Steven's just been like carving us up on this idea of our thoughts. It keeps bringing me back, whether it was thought bubbles or inside voice, like it's so much of it is about our thoughts. So question to everyone, to kind of be vulnerable, give some real talk. What is something that you believe about yourself that's wrong, or a thought that you keep having, and what are you hoping to see God flip it and turn it into? For me, I think an inner belief that I have about myself is that I'm just like obnoxious and lazy. And I think that comes because a lot of my talents, I don't know, like I'm a good communicator. If we're at church, I get caught up in the lobby talking to people. I forget to tear down the tent sometimes, and that makes me feel bad. But the older I get, the more I realize, like, while I need to be responsible, I don't need to be a lazy person, but being who God created me to be is not obnoxious and lazy. It's living to who I'm meant to be.
Because I hear that, and I'm like, I'm the inverse. Yeah. I'm like, I wish that I was more outgoing and loud and better at talking to people, and I'm the one that like has a tendency to put my head down and get stuff done, and then lose track of what actually matters, like the people. Yeah. And so that's just funny that like the thing that you're ashamed, like you don't like about yourself, is the thing that I wish that I embodied more, and the opposite is what I'm ashamed of.
Mine would probably be that isolation is safety.
Yep.
Because I'm like,
You're supposed to talk about you, not about me. Get out of my business.
for me, I would consider myself an extreme introvert. And so I've always felt that isolation was safety, but that has typically led me down the path of falling into like deep depression at times, because isolation is not safety. You know what I mean? There's times to solitude, right? I heard that this weekend, like solitude is getting alone with God, but isolation is something totally different. And so for me, God is flipping that and showing me, not necessarily just telling me, but showing me that isolation is not safety just from what I do here now. Just this, leading an e-group, that is just not something that I would have typically chosen to do. I wouldn't have typically chosen to be part of a team because I say that's just not what I do. That's not me. I'm good by myself. And so he's changing that slowly but surely and pushing me out to do more things where I'm surrounded by people and different types of people just to recognize. So now I have something to compare it to. So when I'm starting to isolate, it's like, no, you can't do that. You need to go. You need to go and just hang out, grab coffee with someone, but don't isolate. So it would be that.
You said we're allowed to be real.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll be real. Something that I really struggle with is viewing God through the perspective of a good father. And it's not necessarily because he hasn't blessed me beyond means or measures. It's because I have this internal dialogue that I'm unworthy. So in my mind, I sometimes go down this dark rabbit hole where it's like, okay, if God really loved me, why would he have me with this internal dialogue? Why am I going through this season where it's super difficult and I'm hard on myself, or that I just can't see the light and it's so hard to find God? If he's a good father, why am I going through this? But a lot of the times I just have to really check myself and say, okay, am I viewing life through his perspective of me? Or is this of my own thoughts? Is this of the world? Because God is not going to look at me and say, yeah, you're not worthy. You're right. Everything that you're thinking is yep, that's what you're supposed to be doing. Absolutely not. He's a good father. And I have to remind myself that all the time. And it is sometimes just looking at my past and being like, okay, I overcame that. That's how I know God's good. Because although I was looking through life through a really foggy lens, God still brought me through that. And I'm stronger than ever because of it.
I love conversations come in layers and waves. And anyone who's been a part of an e-group for a while, they know that the conversations get more accurate. I don't even want to say deep because it's a relative term, but the accuracy of what's really at the heart of something, is so cool. If we were at the table with all guys, porn probably would have got brought up. Not that that's not something that girls struggle with, but I'm just thinking the different types of people we have, the different types of struggles that they have. And I think that's what we want to provide. That's what the youth ministry we want to be. That's why we exist. Pastor Steven said in a message recently that a sin cannot be forgiven unless it's addressed. And it's just crazy. And a verse that reminds me of that is in the book of James. It says that we confess our sins to one another, then we'll be healed. And there's just something that happens in these conversations and the real talk, And every time we wrap one of these videos, I'm like, I hope someone goes and has real talk, meaning the type that can't be recorded, and that they're in an e-group. I don't know if you guys have any final remarks or anything to the family on YouTube, but I think we did some good work today.
Yeah, that's fun, man.
We believe in the youth. All right, guys, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe right now. It means a lot. It means that you love us, and when we comment back, it means we love you. We're gonna get better at that, I promise you. I've hired a lot more people than we used to have, so if it doesn't get any better, just comment below and let us know. But I love you.